All right, so we want to hear how you explain this whole crypto thing to folks in TradFi. Like, how do you explain what's going on here?
Yeah, so I think that the best way to explain it to people in traditional finance, because there's a lot of just emotional response when they hear about this space, is to bring it back down to reality, right? We have been living in an age where we have seen the emergence of a network economy through the provision of platforms, right? We are living in a platform economy age, and we see this through Uber, Facebook, Google, so many, Amazon, so many of the companies that people have invested in and have been able to make really significant profits in most instances, if they timed it right. And that has been the big growth opportunity from an investing perspective in this age. What we are entering is the network era 2.0 that we call it, where instead of having a platform-based economy that is owned, where the platform is owned by a company and you can invest in the stock of a company, we are moving into a protocol economy where the platforms are now open architecture, anyone can join, and the way that you invest in these open networks, these protocols, is through the coins that they issue and the coins that the apps that sit on top of them issue. So it is a huge innovation space. It is a huge growth space. And it is a natural evolution that the technology is enabling. It's just such a different business model that people have had a hard time getting their heads around it.
That is something that we have definitely experienced as podcasters, is trying to help people get their heads around what's going on in crypto. And Sandy, I think that's a fantastic articulation that I've actually never heard before, a platform-centric articulation of what crypto is. Is this an articulation of crypto that you've developed? Because I would imagine explaining crypto to the outside world is something that you've done a number of times. Is this an articulation that has resonated with clients and customers of Franklin Templeton?
Yeah, I think it really is, David. I think it's starting to cut through a lot of the noise and a lot of the emotional responses that people are having. New things are often scary, right? And what I try to explain to people is think about the 1990s. And the way that we saw the huge explosion in internet stocks. And you could argue that maybe any company that issued something that said it was internet got tons of buying interest, and that helped to lead to the dot-com bubble. But we're almost seeing exactly the opposite reaction now. We're almost seeing the fact that there's this whole new set of new innovations that are emerging that are transforming the way that the business models work. But because it's different, almost no one from a huge, when you think about the size of the overall investor pool, almost only a small percentage of people are investing in it. And so whereas we may have overhyped the internet stocks, I think we're underhyping what is happening in the crypto space when you think about it from a broad investor portfolio position.
That's so interesting. Wow. Underhyping what's going on in the crypto space. You hear that, David? We got
that's
more hype work to do.
It's rare that I've heard that about crypto.
No one has accused Bankless of that before. But I think the perspective you're taking is really from TradFi. They're basically underexposed to this asset class because they're not treating it the way they did the stocks, the internet stocks of the 90s. And so your framing of this, just to make sure I understand, is like we have a kind of like, maybe this is the framing of the internet. And I sort of think about, Chris Dixon's like framing of you have Web 1 and 2 and then you have Web 3, right? And it's similar to that, whereas Web 1 and 2 kind of gave us this platform type of economy. So we got our Ubers, we got our Amazons, we got our Facebooks, of course. And that was a platform type of network. And now we have a protocol network and a protocol economy. So these would be things like Bitcoin, or things like Ethereum, or things like Uniswap. And the reason you're maybe, I'm guessing, that you are painting this narrative to folks in traditional finance is because everyone knows within living memory, everyone felt the 90s internet, right? And they certainly felt all of the impressive wave of innovation that hit us. And there were a lot of skeptics at the time, particularly in kind of the early 90s, right? This is the internet thing. What is it? I remember there was a David Letterman with Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. There was kind of an interview where Bill Gates is trying to describe the internet, and he's describing something that like probably is best manifest in Spotify, like it's the ability to share music, and Letterman goes to him. He's something like, "Oh, so you're talking about radio? I mean, we already have radio," and the crowd laughs, right? So this is kind of the analogy that you're using, and you're saying, is that starting to land with traditional investors?
I think that it is starting to, because one of the odd things about the last few years is that traditional investors have tried to separate out the technology from the ecosystem that's actually creating and developing the technology. So, a lot of institutional and a lot of professional investors will say, oh, yes, well, I'm very interested in investing in blockchain, but they're not actually investing in the models that blockchain is creating, right? They keep waiting for some magical moment that blockchain transforms into something they recognize from the current world. And I think that, the evolution of the space in the crypto domain has advanced so far now that it really is becoming easier and easier to get them to understand that there's a whole new story emerging, and that new story is where growth is really going to move. And we may even see a lot of the platform companies from this Web 2 era begin to move in that direction as well, which would just be almost the ultimate affirmation of this idea that we're moving from the network era 1.0 to the network era 2.0.
Sandy, Ryan and I got into crypto in 2017, and that much earlier in phase in crypto's like lifespan. We were not ready to talk to Franklin Templeton back in 2017 as an industry. We just weren't ready for that. But as I've watched crypto develop and become more mature, I've also seen society look more and more towards futurist tech as investment vehicles. And so like as crypto has become less like a Wild West, a little bit more civilized. The traditional world of finance has looked into more and more futurist investments, and so like I've seen this slow collision of our two worlds kind of come together, and I think that's why crypto people right now are very excited about the Bitcoin ETF. It is the first actual point of contact between our two worlds. And I want to ask you about like when you're talking to your clients and your customers and the capital base that is in the world of Wall Street. Why weren't they here sooner? Like what were they resistant to about the crypto world? And is it something as simple as they just needed a trusted brand, a trusted entity to really be that conduit? Or are there other reasons that they're more still resistant to crypto investment opportunities?
Yeah, it's a great question. Just for your reference too, I wrote my first big piece of thought leadership about tokenization in 2017 and spoke with a lot of the big TradFi players, and a lot of them got up and walked out, to be quite honest with you. They were not ready to hear it at that point, but they're more ready to hear it. And there's a few reasons, and it's not necessarily these bad reasons that sometimes people attribute to TradFi. Number one, they are fiduciaries, right? And so any decision they make on behalf of their clients, and they are personally held responsible, right? So a firm like Franklin Templeton that invests its clients' money has a fiduciary responsibility to those clients, and therefore it is very hard to operate in domains that don't have clear regulations, right? Don't have clear consumer protection. So that is naturally a point where they're going to have to move very slowly because it's very hard for them to operate in any domain where there's that type of uncertainty. It's also, there is a culture within traditional finance that is slow to change. It was a culture that was very much focused on proprietary technology. Just to make the crypto folks feel better, it took a lot of years for the traditional financial firms to begin to embrace cloud technologies, right? They were very much operating with a set of proprietarily built apps, and they felt like the only way they could keep control of their business was through using this proprietary infrastructure. So there has had to be a lot of shifting in the embracing of basically the new era of technologies for these firms to even be in a receptive position to think about and understand crypto. So, a lot of these firms have been around for decades and decades. And so to them, getting into a new marketplace within the first 10 or 15 years is actually pretty fast, right? It's just crypto has developed so quickly at the speed of innovation and change, and really truly creative thinking has been happening so fast I think that there has been it's almost like one set of participants is strolling along the stream and the other set of participants is running on a treadmill, right? So the speed with which they tend to operate is very different. But that is starting to come together. And I think you're right. What we're really finding is that we're starting to now pull together the ingenuity of the crypto domain with, I think, some of the really necessary and important understanding about where consumer protections and controls are required that TradFi has been very comfortable operating within. And I think the result is very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly agree with you, and so I think the case you make of why there's been some resistance to it makes sense. But like I've got to say, maybe just zoning in on this sort of visceral reaction. You said you came out with a thought piece, in 2017 or somewhere along that, and there was like a reaction of get up and walk out. Like there seems to be this something we didn't see in the 90s with the tech stocks, right? And so of course you have to embrace this new world of the internet, and that's hard to wrap your head around. But it's there was never there was like some doubt as to whether stock price was as valuable as it was, but there was never kind of the castigation. There was never the sense in traditional finance that made people want to get up and walk out. Like this sense that crypto is just full of Ponzi schemes and like it's fraud and it's all of these things. Why do you think there's that kind of stronger reaction here? Is it because they're just not keeping tabs on the industry, or is there something else? I mean, crypto is kind of like disrupting some things in traditional finance as well. I don't know if that's scary for folks or if that factors into this.
I definitely think that's absolutely one of the factors. I think, there's a few things, right? I think that some of the reason people had a negative response to that report that I had come out with in 2017 is I really spoke about tokenization as replacing traditional equities and bonds over time. That was a very threatening proposition to people whose entire core business has been based around equities and bonds. Now, what we're seeing is it's transforming them rather than replacing them. But we're still in early days. I still think in the long run, the structure of an equity or a bond could be improved. But that will happen over time. I do think that one of the reasons why there is this backlash is some of the nomenclature that's used, right? That the crypto domain was originated by the cypherpunks. That's a scary term. That sounds very radical.
Sure.
I think that some of the early uses when Bitcoin was really flying under the regulatory perimeter through the Silk Road and things, people have a lot of lasting memory about that. But I think that the most important one is that everyone in traditional finance makes their living about modeling an asset class that has been really well researched and modeled for many years, and they understand the underlying value drivers. The biggest pushback I get from a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the space is, well, what are any of these things worth? I mean, I can hold up a piece of paper and tell you this piece of paper is really valuable and you can bid for me on it. And if people are willing to buy it, doesn't mean it's valuable. So they're mistaking this idea of what does a network effect accomplish? It's not that there is no asset there. The asset is the network that is supporting and participating in the creation of the commerce that takes place on that network, right? But that's a very new concept to measure in terms of the network itself being the value, right? And that moves away from a lot of the traditional ways that analysts in traditional finance analyze assets. So, that has been a new situation that they've had to deal with. And tokenomics is a completely new type of analysis that they've had to think about and learn. And a lot of people's tokenomics are still kind of developing, right? And there's not a lot of standardization. So, it's taken a lot of commitment to really understand the space. And I think I'm lucky that Franklin Templeton is a firm that is very committed to understanding that.
If you enjoyed all of that, then you'll absolutely love the Bankless newsletter. Join over 300,000 fellow readers, all for free. Click below to sign up.